It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
We've talked about these little aspects of us that come
fragments,
leaping up, or leaking out, depending. And I had a moment recently. It's more than a moment. The moment is just the aha, and then what the ramifications for that were afterwards is something slightly different. But here's the aha.
Mm-hmm.
There's an aspect within me. It's a learned trait, but it's a self that I identify with. And I
learned or a conditioned trait?
Well, it's
like
a combination.
A response to a way that you made things work for yourself?
Yeah, that's right. So I think conditioned is fine. We can call it that. I adapted in the world by taking on this trait, this sort of way that I got by and succeeded and did succeed. And I call it clever boy.
Clever.
Thank you. And the reason it is important for me is that I recognize how much this shows up and how strongly I react to it in my life. It is...
is it okay that I just burped into the microphone?
Perfectly
Never mind.
Fine. You could have let that go by now.
We're givers here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. We're totally transparent.
We hold nothing back. Nothing's held back here, including bodily functions. Thank you, Barnet. But there's part of me that kind of keeps being amplified, and I keep seeing it mirrored for me. You know, we've talked a lot of times about the sort of economic crises, our own individual and the collective economic crisis, and how we track for ourselves what part of us is being reflected. It's interesting because the villain in my story, in the drama that I see coming at me, it appears as though it's coming at me. I know better than that, but that's how it appears to me. Is about this clever boy. It's about this.
So you're seeing people in the world that are cleverly manipulating, and then what I'm hearing is you're pointing, there's a clever manipulator, and that one is way too clever, and he's manipulating, and then you're seeing it as a mirror and discovering the parts of where you do that. Yeah,
and it's the part of me that learned to be very. It's arrogance, but arrogance has a judgment to it. Again, it's adaptive. It's the way that I could get into situations with this sense that I can talk my way out of it, that I can manipulate my way through it. The idea that I'll win, that I'll be clever enough to find a way to win.
So what happened? Like what's a dynamic so that we can illustrate, so you can illustrate for me and for our listeners the connection between how you're holding it inside about yourself and how it is showing up on the outside. We pretend unrelated.
Yeah, well, this is just my manipulations. This is all the little ways I manipulate in my life to get what I want. I mean, we've talked about it. You experienced it as sort of, we've called the horse petting, but it's a bit deeper than horse petting. It is very hard for me to give up. It is very hard for me to let go of my manipulations, and specifically my cleverness.
So not so much that it's deeper, but that it is that you're saying you have a more addictive relationship.
Definitely.
You're still getting a payoff from it.
That's the issue. The issue is about
what is the payoff?
But for me, it was my way to get by and succeed, and I got a lot of approval in my life for being clever. You know, there was a big pat on the back for my cleverness. You know, as we've spoken before, the love is heavily conditional.
So it's almost like a scales, or those scales of justice thing. And on one side, as you're speaking about it, you're talking about as unpleasant as it is, the status or the love or the even temporary hit of approval that you get more than counterbalances the ickiness of it. In the past.
It doesn't anymore, but yeah, that's absolutely right. And yet at the same time, what I didn't recognize is it was robbing me of intimacy. It was robbing me of things that are really important to me, connection, because I would hold back a little my connection so I could keep the manipulator in the game, so that I could get what I wanted from people versus really caring about them, caring about what their interests might be. And is what I'm doing generous? Is it generative? I didn't consider that in the past. You know, when I was, I had a certain business where there was an opportunity to make a lot of money. Now, there was an expression within that business. We called them hit and runs. This is where people didn't establish relationships. They just were in it to make a deal. We called them deal guys.
Opportunism.
Yeah, this is back when I was in real estate development, and I would always say, "Oh, I'm not that guy. I'm not the hit and run guy. I'm in it for the long haul. I'm building relationships."
You're talking about shadow, a big shadow
There's a
piece.
huge
I would
shadow
hate
piece.
to think.
That's
usually
exactly
when
right.
Usually when I say to myself, I would hate to think
Yeah.
that I am righteous or arrogant, or I would hate to think that I'm a teller, or that I would hate to think that. The moment it's like I would hate to think, that's pretty much a marquee thing for Barnet Bain Presents.
Yeah, big bright lights. Pay attention.
I would hate to think. I hate to think it's it's the most denied because there's a charge on it. And
huge.
I noticed when you were speaking, there was. Don't kick me around like that. When you were speaking, there was a point at which you were talking about you were sort of in your safety zone around with the shadow.
I don't want to cop to the.
Well, then there was a moment. There was a moment, and I'm sure folks probably caught it because they know us really well after almost a year and a half now on this show.
Yeah.
There was a moment when you were talking about certain kind of investors, and then there was like anger in it. There was a whoa. There was like suddenly there was a second where there was like this anger, and then it got bottled again, and it got all nice. But there was a rage in there for a second. Am I right?
Yeah, I think I still have huge judgment about that world that I operate in.
Let's not get lost in the judgment part, because the judgment is an anesthetic. It's just like Novocaine to the heart and the brain.
Right.
And we don't have to deal with anything.
Right.
We don't have to deal with anything.
Right.
But the power in there, not that it's good
wise.
or bad, but when you hit that moment of, and I saw your eyes blaze.
Yeah.
The energy and the creativity, the pure juice in there that is in there. And right now it's got a bottle on it like a pressure cooker because there's that judgment piece that you're using to anesthetize yourself from the experience of all of that juice. And that in the release of the juice, for a moment you have to release the story too. We release the stories too, and that's going to feel icky for a sec. And then, but it doesn't hurt us. We release it. And then all of that blazing energy that's tied up now in the anger at the self over the story, and then the anger of the story, all of that is a black hole of energy, and all that energy is vital and life force, and it is instead of it being available to use to generate meaningful and deep connections and relationships and satisfying projects and work and ventures and connections, the same energy that it takes to do that is being put to a highly, highly creative and disciplined use. It takes a lot of energy and creativity to put a pressure cooker on that level of rage, which just keeps getting more and more thermonuclear. Ever since George Bush, I haven't been able to say that word.
Yeah.
So I just very, very powerfully understood it as you spoke it. Understood, wow, yeah, I get that. I see it, and I understand how and where I do it.
Yeah.
I understand. We are all you and I certainly are at a place where we recognize these shadow things. And I still nobilize them in how I hold them, and when I feel the energy behind it, I just say, well, give me a little Novocaine. Just let me just judge that and get off that really fast. The gold is I'm now going to appropriately experience the intensity, the energy in this tense, in this moment. I have been denying this for so many years. It's building. I just tapped my rage, or I just tapped my hurt, or I just tapped my...
Yeah, no, and that's accurate for me. You know, it's what I like to do, because it's really wrapped around stories of injustice and stories of manipulation, and that's the way I framed it in my experience. But just to allow it out in a creative. This is why acting was so important for me. Is I got to play these roles with abandon. I didn't have to apologize.
You didn't have to own
for
any
being
of it,
the
though.
bad guy, right? But it was a wonderful place to channel these energies and creative and constructive.
The acting thing, we said this before on this show. Actors are so trained to be able to access all of these frequencies and energies, and so trained to have a deep understanding of the architecture of subconscious and agendas and intentions, that the intentions that underlie the actions of a scene, underline the delivery of a line. And yet, here's the real powerful takeaway for me. Because they're so gifted at doing it as technique, there is a disconnect from owning.
I understand.
From owning how close they are, how intimate they are with the tools for self-releasing.
Well, what you're talking about is there's a certain amount of permission in the separation that I'm not the character.
Yeah,
that allows
that's
me
what you're speaking to.
Yeah, it is.
You're saying, I get to play out all this stuff, but I don't actually ever have to release any of it.
That's right. Well,
or own any of it.
It feels like a release. Yeah, the owning of it, the saying, and that's me.
It feels like a cathartic moment.
It does.
In the same way that taking a drug feels like a cathartic moment. You get like a short-term boost, but there's no acknowledgement. This is me. And so it's not honored. You know, to honor an insight, or to honor another person, or to honor yourself means you honor somebody by being changed by it.
Yeah,
There's no honoring. They just go right back.
Okay, so this is the biggest challenge in owning the mirror. In saying it's all a mirror, then we have to own what's being reflected back. That's the big challenge.
You have to change.
Right. You have to do something. You have to respond to it.
You have to respond to it.
Yeah.
You have to respect and
It's not
respond.
sufficient just to take note. It's not sufficient.
But what do we do? Here's what I do. And we're close, so I know you do some of this, but I do this a lot. I get it. And then I kind of do my dance between the anesthetics, the judgment, and the vulnerability, and then, at least in the past, I don't change. I don't have the sustaining. I don't apply to it the sustaining energy of discipline and ownership, as well as love, which is a sustaining energy. We're all very familiar about the manifesting energies, of gratitude and primarily gratitude. But there is a sustaining energy that involves discipline and ownership. And so I have these insights frequently, as you do these shadow insights, and I go, wow, I get it. And then I beat myself up a little bit and I get past that. Right. And then the honoring, which is the ability to be changed by by whatever it is you're honoring, whether it's an insight or another person. I love somebody, I allow allow myself to be changed by that relationship.
Yeah.
That is sustained through discipline. I have to continually redirect energy. My energy follows attention, and I'm used to going here, and now I'm going to honor this individual, this insight, by redirecting it here, and until it becomes a new practice, until it becomes embodied and natural. But I have not been so effective about that piece, and that's what I hear you referring to, and that's what I meant by acting. Actors, they do it, but there is the sustaining energy of making that a personal insight and honoring it by being changed by it and having the discipline to...
I'm going to speak to this, because there actually is a way. We've talked about this before. And it has to do with, there is a moment or an opportunity, a space, wherein I have this revelation of, for me, it's clever boy. Oh my gosh, that's clever boy. And there's a level of vulnerability in that moment. But it's an there's a higher energy in that moment. I mean, it's a vulnerability that's life supportive. That opens up possibility for me. But we've often talked about this too, as sort of being off the reservation. Like in that moment, this space opens up. But my tendency is to rush back
to the familiar,
to try to contextualize it in my day-to-day life versus to stay in that level of unknown, that sort of wobbly place of who am I now? This is what I was trying to talk about earlier. If I'm not clever boy, and the answer is I don't know.
I don't know.
And
then
I don't
we
know
grow
becomes
into it.
Sacred.
Yes.
Yes, that's what we've talked about
And
before.
you honor the I don't know.
Yeah.
By feeding attention to it and holding the awkward tension between what is familiar and safe and known.
That's it.
And what you and I have referred to as ultra creativity, which is a developing closeness and tenderness and intimacy with parts of ourselves that we have yet to own. But I am honoring it. I'm allowing myself to be changed. My choices, my behaviors are being redirected in a different way in order that I can become close with what is still unfamiliar. And I'm in the tension of it.
Absolutely.
I'm in the tension of it. That's a seasoning. That is a maturing of the self.
Yeah.
It requires a certain discipline to be able to do that. Not tyranny. Not just a certain discipline.
And a certain courage. I mean, we talk
That's
about
will
courage.
and action. That's the higher frequency, higher octave of the integrated masculine energy of will and action, to be able to make a commitment and to willfully direct energy in a particular place.
Right.
Out of a balanced humility with the feminine, so that there is a willingness to be changed.
That may have flown past people. I know what you're talking about. That's
flew past me.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
What I was going to bring it to is there's a level of courage. So courage comes from the French word cœur, which means heart, which is an openness, a willingness.
I thought it meant scruffy dog.
It might mean that as well. That may be in Arabic. It means scruffy dog. I don't know. In some language, this means what I'm trying to say.
Right, cur. The cur of get that cur fed.
Right. But that piece of willingness, and I think there's a practice in willingness, the willingness consistently to show up, the willingness, that's a very rich.
The willingness
and
is
fertile
a humility. Is this again? This it is a sort of feminine energy of possibility, of potential and possibility. The will.
No, I understand the discipline, the will and action, where you
the
actually commit
will
to doing something,
to own something.
Yep. Yeah.
That feminine energy just creates the possibility, it creates the boundary. It holds the boundary for the possibility to exist, but she can only go so far.
That's right. You got to get in.
Somebody's got to have the will to occupy the space.
Yeah. Who do I want to be in relationship with the clever boy that comes up? Who do I want to be in relationship with? How do I want to be in relationship with that aspect of myself? And
how do you want to be?
Compassionate. And clearer, because that represents a part of me that is doesn't have a healthy relationship with being scared, trying to control and dominate, manipulate, so forth. So there's layers of it that I'm willing to get in there and be with, and then find cleaner expression in the world for what is my real intention. We've talked about this a lot, and I know we're sort of at the end of this segment, but just that. When we have a clear intent, it cleans up a lot of the confusion. Either we're
no longer petting the horse.
And then what we're doing is either in alignment.
Do you think anybody knows what we're talking about? If
we say petting the horse?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to go back and watch Petting the Horse, but it's worth watching. So check it out.
I like how we managed to plug our own stuff.
Petting the horse.
Aside watching and listening.
Petting the horse, in a very simple phrase, is an adaptive pattern of behavior whereby we actually defeat our higher intention by being distracted by all these adaptive ways we've learned to get by or survive or whatever. That's all we're talking about. And it was illustrated by you having the experience with a horse that reads only the energy you're putting out, that only responds to the energy you're putting out. Not what you say you're doing, not what you pretend to be doing, but actually operates and meets you at the level of energy. That's why it clears up the confusion. It's brilliant, actually, because clearly Clever Boy is an adaptive behavior. It's a horse petting behavior, and it doesn't really go to the heart of the matter of what I really want. And what I really want is to be closer, to be more trustworthy, to be more reliable to myself and others. That's the truth. And so what this behavior pattern does is it takes me out of all that. And then it shows up in my world as tyranny. It shows up as all these people who are screwing me or trying to screw me or polluting the environment or whatever.
Okay.
Bang!
Easy there, partner.
But that's how it shows up. And I don't want to own that. I want to make it them. And then I go, wow.
But
it's me. It's Clever Boy.
Own the energy that you just tapped into.
I love it. That's the good stuff.
Well, don't just love it. Just actually own. I'm sort of tapping into the impact of it.
Yeah.
And without any story, not about whether I love it or just, wow, I'm exploring the wavefront. Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I don't want to spin. I don't want to spin out into.
But I'm taking you back to what you said earlier. Look, Barnett, the impassioned guy, and this has come up in other episodes, whether it's, a political Occupy Wall Street who's got a megaphone and he's on the corner screaming, the energy underneath his outrage is fine. How it ends up getting put out.
But quite far below.
Yeah.
So far below. I mean, that's for another, because we run out of time. There is so much hurt and disappointment and belief structure that is cluttering the gap between where people want to be and where they are, cluttered with what I have a right to be, what I'm entitled to be, what beliefs and body chemistry and hurts, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. When that gets cleared through enough, there is a place that even in the darkness of these stories, we referred to it on that show we did called Battlefield Poets. You start to go down, drill down, even into the constrictive energies, into the darkness of any of the matter. There is ultimately light, and that is a communication, a relationship to this energy beyond our time and beyond our logic and reason, and that's passion. Now, often we tap into this juice in people in creative arts tap into it, and they sometimes confuse the art form with the passion itself. But being wildly energetic or emotionally vital isn't necessarily connected to passion. It could be connected to hurt, righteousness, pain. It could be connected to vindication. It could be connected to envy. It can be connected to all kinds of things. But I understand what you're referring to, and I'm making the distinction so that we don't.
It's snapping out of the malaise.
So we
That's
pull
all
out,
I'm talking about.
So we pull out
That's
of
all
the.
I'm talking about. We're
there's
talking
a
about snapping out of the malaise.
There's a trance that we get into.
Yes, and having
well
the ability
said.
to fire up some emotion.
Well said.
You're right. It can be led off in all manner of
said.
directions that aren't helpful. But the idea that there is something in there that we can tap into, a source, if you will, that's got juice.
And we can develop the skill to do that.
And
we can develop
without
the
collateral
tools
damage. Without collateral damage. That's the big piece.
That's the whole piece.
That's the whole piece.
That's the whole piece. I mean, I'm so used to wanting to tap into it, even at the expense of, I'm just following my thing, and if people get hurt, or if I get hurt, I get hurt. And it was appropriate at a certain developmental stage, and there are other tools now that we're beginning to become more masterful at using.
Beautiful. And with that, we get to say goodbye. Another great opportunity to throw some ideas back and
That was
forth
really
at
good.
the edge of possibility. Thanks for tuning in, and if you enjoy the show, please send it on to other folks so they can enjoy it as well and keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness.